Oh, yeah, yeah. She's trying to like see on a micro center, like passive.
So we got, let's see, for the, so I wanted to do a tour at Rumpke Recycling on Wednesday, a week from yesterday. But only one person replied and that person said they couldn't go. So is there some time that we could do tours? Like, is there any, like you're all chemical engineers in the same cycle more or less, right? Is there some, I don't know. Does anyone want to do tours? So when? To go on tours, like to go down to Rumpke and look at the recycling thing. I mean, it's outside the class. I mean, other people that aren't in the class can go on it too. We kind of need at least 5 people to make it worthwhile, you know? So, anyway, can you guys pick a time or can we vote on it or something or? What time? Yes.
I know that this is probably gonna be unpopular opinion, I feel like most of us have like no classes on Fridays, but like the rest of us, like I have like a lab on Wednesdays at that time, so like our labs are like throughout whatever, so it'd be really hard for me to like take time out of my day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because some professors aren't understanding if I have to miss class, whereas like if it was on Friday, like I just have to work around my one work.
Yeah, Friday's okay. What time on Friday?
I'm free after 12:30, 1-ish, but I also don't know, like, that's something.
Well, no one else has offered another time, you know, so let's say, so let's move it, try to go for Friday in the afternoon. Say 1:30.
I don't think that anyone has.
Yeah, that's all right with me. Is that anyone? I mean, it's only people that would want to go on a tour that it matters for, right? So that one is down to like 3 people, you know? So anyway. I mean, who would go like on, say, like next Friday, 1:30? Oh, okay, well, that would be really good. Oh, yeah, right, you're the one that suggested it, right, but there's more than enough that could fill it out. I mean, would you guys want to go then? I mean, of those that could go, I guess if you raise your hand, you would want to go. All right, so yeah, it'd be like, so this place, like the Rumpke Recycling is literally like 14 minutes from here. So that one's pretty easy. But then Lyondell, we can do kind of anytime we want, but basically it's half an hour from here. And then it's also, last time we did that, you did that last time, didn't you? Or did you do that too?
I don't know if there was 2 tours. I missed the first one, but I did a copper tour.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, Lyondell's pretty good anyway. But there's like 2 parts. There's an analytic polymer part, then there's like a processing polymer part. And each one takes at least an hour or 2, because there's a lot of stuff to see. Oh, the cable thing, right? That was a pretty good tour. Yeah. Yeah, but they don't do recycling. They just make cable. So anyway, the Lyondell one's really cool. Like, I mean, I think if you're interested in plastics, it's really good. Because it's like the #1 producer of polyethylene in the country, actually in the world, I think, but, and that's their US tech support place. So they have all the process lines to do different processing things for polymers. And they also have like an analytic lab. So you can see like all the possible analytic stuff. And so it's a pretty good one to do. So the Rumpke Recycling is really good too, but anyway, all right, what will happen is I booked that thing at least like a month and a half ago. So he'll say like, oh, I can't do it. This Jeff Schneider, he's coming to talk on the 26th of September. So I'll find out when he can do it, but I doubt he'll say like next Friday. Like every other time he said like, oh, I can only do it at 7 in the morning. You know, like we did one other tour there for some other class and it was like early in the morning, really early. And but this one, since he's given the talk, maybe he's more motivated for it or something. Anyway, so right, so let me write it down or something like 1:30. See, there's some paper here. There's a weird thing with the with the web, like I try to update files and they don't update sometimes. Upsetting the feeds. That's happened with the notes for this for today, but it's okay, but. So say 1:30 on Fridays. Actually, it would have worked out great if I just said Fridays, like when I talked to them before. So yeah, there's probably like 3 other places to tour now that we could go to. Again, it's like not, so anybody can go, like outside of the class, people are interested. And then so hopefully we can get, but if we can get all those people, that'd be great. I mean, that'd be almost too many, you know, because like 20, because like when you go through Rumpke, you have to walk through a functioning like assembly line kind of thing with conveyor belts. So there's some kind of danger involved, you know, somewhat. So I think they make you wear a helmet or something or other. And then so basically you can get lost too. It's really noisy. So he talks over a microphone, but basically you can't hear him unless you're right next to him. So, but just seeing it is pretty good. If people take like videos and stuff of it, like with your cell phone, it's pretty cool. Like a lot of the stuff is really cool to see. The separation technology, you have robots and everything. So it's pretty good. Anyway, so all right, I'll try to move that thing. That's good. And then yeah, next week on Thursday, Ryan's coming, and then a couple of weeks, Jeff Schneider and this Carrie Harms from the Cincinnati Recycle and Reuse Center is going to come. I'm trying to get her to talk kind of off the cuff instead of she has a prepared talk. I don't think that'll be as good, but we'll see what she comes up with. And then this Kelly Williams is from a Palmer Film Processing Company that specializes in recycled films, also in Cincinnati. We might be able to tour his place too if it looks like it's of interest. Anyway, and then I have like 4 other people lined up, but they haven't given me times yet. Like the tire, Liberty Tire in Columbus, there's somebody that's going to do it. And some other places. Anyways, there's a whole slew of places. So I think it's good to hear from different aspects, you know, maybe, I guess I'd like to get more of the fluffy people like the Cincinnati Reuse and Recycle, but it's kind of like not that many of them specialize exactly. Like there's Matthew Ministries that does like, they collect a lot of stuff for reuse, you know. And there's like Habitat for Humanity and stuff, but none of them are really exactly plastics oriented. Whereas this recycle reuse one is so again, there's like kind of 2, there's this fluff end of it and there's this kind of industrial end of it, or the kind of money making end of it, you know. And then so the 2 of them seem to be kind of separate. So it'd be interesting to hear what Carrie Harms has to say about Rumpke Recycling. I'm sure Rumpke Recycling doesn't even know they exist. But actually they have a factory there. There's quite a bit of material going through the place. So it isn't like it's a small scale operation. So it's kind of interesting to see the 2 divergent things going on, but and they don't necessarily have to do with each other. Anyway, so that's about that. Any questions on the homework, the teams or anything? Has that worked out yet?
Will be assigned me.
Yes, on Canvas.
So I got email about my team. I was like,
Yeah, so every week there's a different team. So somebody, and if you don't participate, like you say you don't respond to that email.
so my other question is, how long is this? We're gonna talk about it, but I started working on it.
Short.
Because I got 5 days.
Oh, well, that's great. That's like an A. That's good, you know. If it's coherent, you know.
I read the book and started to select quotes from the chapter.
Yeah. It's up to you how much you want to do if you're interested in it. If you don't have the time, it's fine, you know. And like I said, ChatGPT can answer it for you. It's like if you don't necessarily have to search through it. I'm expecting you're going to spend, I mean, legally, you're supposed to send this same like 3 hours, like you have 3 hours class, 3 hours on the homework, but I'd expect like half an hour for these things. And I mean, I'm not really getting strict on this, so, and it's a group of people, so don't kill yourself. You know, just try to meter yourself out. I know you work too hard and stuff. That's why I'm saying that. I mean, you can't take it too seriously. It's not that, you know, it's basically like whatever your level of interest.
Too hard.
Yeah, so concentrate on the other class. That's what I would do. This is more or less like, if you're interested in the book, read it, and read the other book, the thing about made to fail or whatever. That's a much longer book, and it's like a history book that goes through all the problems of this in this sector, back to the 1800s. So, but
Well, a lot of this book is like in the 1920s.
he begins, so he's taken that other book and he's kind of given a synopsis a little bit of it. So basically, in adding a few things of his own, but basically he's lifting from other things. So basically the main thing is that Built to Fail or whatever book.
Well, yeah, Designed to Fail. 'Cause
Designed to
even
Fail.
Before 1900, people were taking pride in how long things would last, and then starting in the 1900s came consumerism and Built to Fail.
Right.
And then there was the Great Depression where people started to conserve it, and then we won the wars, and then after that, people started to go back to consumerism. I think for more Built to Fail.
Yeah. I mean, the Built to Fail is that so people, I guess the idea is, the beginning part of the idea is that in Europe, and people had these controlled villages that they lived in, kind of idealized German village or whatever, and like there wasn't any waste, like they didn't waste anything. That was a concept. Then they came to the US, and all of a sudden there was like plenty of land, plenty of food, plenty of everything, coal. So you just like didn't care about wasting all of a sudden.
And the US has the 19th highest quality of life out of countries around the world.
Yeah, now, but basically in the 1800s, we were doing okay, I think. I mean, people were happier here than they were in Europe, but they wouldn't have come here. It's basically they had really cramped living conditions, and they came here, and all of a sudden it's wide open Ohio. I mean, it's like it looks pretty good. I mean, then they just start the idea of like, I have unlimited amount of land, I can trash it. I can petrochemical it or do whatever I want. It doesn't matter because it's infinite. Dig up the coal, leave the strip mines there, right? Whatever. So the American mentality is built on that in a sense, right? It's kind of like our addition to society is to waste. Like the thing we added to European culture is just like torch it and walk along, walk away.
Book advocates against that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is fluff, it isn't true. It's not necessarily true. And it's kind of human nature too. So it isn't, I mean, so it's putting the guilt on us in a sense, but basically the people that came here weren't from here. They came from some other places. They brought their ideas with them. And they still did the same thing,
The book puts the guilt on us, but the book does advocate for capitalist reform instead of a socialist government regulations.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's involved with politics too. I mean, in a sense, you can't. So yeah, it's partly true and partly not true, It's like capitalism giving us a lot of good things too. Like I was gonna go through a couple of things, but like, so you have like this. So this is an insulin pump, it's all almost completely made of plastic. It's only got a little teeny, I've taken these apart, there's just a little piece of metal in there. That's it. The rest of it's all plastic. And it's disposable, a 3-day use, toss it. So basically, this is a linear thing. It's an example of something that, like, this is a huge life improvement. Like, it's got no cables to it, nothing. It just does that thing, and then you toss it after 3 days. Right, so that's a way improvement over any technology that was there before for the people that use it. But if you look at it, it comes in like a blistered pack, and like it's got all this packaging with it that you have to throw away. It's all just complete. And there's a whole movement among the medical field that culminated in COVID when these masks, we ran out of masks, right? So there was a while where you couldn't get the 95 masks. People were like clamoring for them, and people were stockpiling them and everything. I mean, I went to a doctor and they had a stack of them on the counter. I grabbed like 20 of them, because it was like, okay, these are going to run out really fast. So, I mean, as it turned out, the mask became like a symbol of the left wing or something or other, to the right wing people. So, but anyway, among medical professionals, they were doing shifts and they didn't have any masks. They ran out, so they were just getting exposed, right? So they're upset about it. And it turns out the mask that they had that you were just disposing, you just tossed it after single use. Turns out you could recondition them and use them for like a couple of months. and they were still effective. Right, so there was kind of a movement among the medical, like nurses and some doctors, about this kind of idea about waste, plastic waste in the medical field. Right, so it's kind of like the two opposed things. Like this thing is kind of life improving, and this thing is like something that was so wasteful that it actually killed people. Like people were dying of COVID because they didn't have a mask, or they. I mean, some didn't want to wear a mask, but basically the ones that wanted to, they weren't in masks. Right? So we ran out at some point. Like the governor of Maryland cut a deal with Korea to get masks. Right? I think he's running for the Senate now. But anyway, so so that's part of the linear thing. Like it isn't always bad to have this linear economy. Like some things are good. Some things are better linear than they are circular. You know, and then in some cases, that mentality in the medical field leads to people dying because they don't have a mask. So, anyway, that's just one kind of thing. So, this is from the book, Burns' book. Is that his name? Burns, I think. But anyway, that you have like existing recycling is actually a boon to the economy, which is an argument. So 90 million tons, and the disposal fees that are saved is $3 billion nationally across the US, you know. So that's, I mean, 350 million people, so that's like, I don't know, what is it end up being? Like $100 or something, I guess, each, but it's not, when you reduce it by the number of people in the US, it gets to be less, but then the jobs that are created for the circular is 100 billion, 540,000 jobs, again, across the US, so how that adds up with 350 million, it's not a huge thing, but. And then he mentions like all these public-private partnerships, of which he's the one that made money off this, like New York City, he was involved with these companies, right? And then Minnesota has this set up, it's like Minneapolis, and then Chicago. Then he mentions like Cincinnati, Columbus, and Rumpke Recycling. In fact, Cincinnati seems to come into play quite a bit, like mentioned in footnotes in this book, you know. So like the bottle recycling thing, there's a study done in Cincinnati. Anyway, so basically like circulars originated with this flow end of things and it's gone into industry where it's like a main theme on the plastics people. And then basically these are kind of the ideas, kind of longevity and reuse of things, harmony with nature. And then what does it ignore? Well, this whole thing is like, oh, we can just keep going where we're going if we can just figure out how to reuse plastic bottles and fill with shampoo at the store instead of buying the bottle of shampoo, which is something that's like minor. Like people think, oh, that's going to be terrible. Like when I was in college, like your age, we had a co-op and I did that. That's how I got all my stuff. It was cheaper, you know, so you just had a bottle and filled it. And they were talking about, it was the same kind of idea, you know, back then, you know, so it was like, it wasn't a big deal to do that. People think like, people, I guess, have been convinced that they need to get something and throw it away. And it's not really true. Like, so it's pretty easy to make that shift. But the problem is like, there's too many people and the people world, and it's not in the US because our population without immigration is going down. Right, so we aren't producing enough actually. So we need immigration to keep the economy right. Like if you want to have Social Security, when you retire, you're going to have immigrants. Otherwise you won't have it, right? So your life will really deteriorate rapidly without immigration in the US, you know. It's not true in Africa, right? And then India and China, who are on this exponential growth. China's flat, but basically Africa and India are like going up exponentially. So all the people have to come here or our economy will collapse. That's the bottom line of it, you know. So anyway, if we could solve the overpopulation problem, that would have a big impact on this, you know, but apparently that's not possible. You know, so we're doomed kind of to this exponential growth. This idea of the demand-driven economy, so that's a big part of the problem that circular doesn't necessarily solve. And then, so basically there's some issues that are ignored by this whole process. And also the idea missing here is that if you pull out all the polyolefins from the petrochemical stream, you're going to end up with this huge waste stream of like chlorine gas I mentioned before, and also all the other kind of oil byproducts that are being consumed to make the plastics, right? So it's a more of a holistic picture that's kind of needed in this thing. I mentioned the oil wells in Colorado, and then so yeah, so there is a corporate motivation, and you see it. You guys have seen it when you co-op, or has anyone had this like circular thing at their co-op jobs, or like where people are researching it? Like Lyondell, this is the only thing they talk about. Like when you go there, so if we go to a tour of Lyondell, everyone there is talking about the circular economy. It's a polyethylene producer. Now, the same thing at Sun Chemical that makes pigments here. So all along and the P&G is in the same boat, I think. You co-op with P&G, right?
Yeah.
Do they ever talk about circular? Or?
I'm like more R&D, so like, I feel like that's not really like where I've been, but I know they have been doing a lot more and like focusing on like bringing in materials that could be used from like by making like stocks, right? Like used from like waste, like I know they're putting like a lot of emphasis on like what they're saying, like, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I asked a guy there that I know, he's like in the research and doing simulations and stuff, but I asked him, I like these phone calls that say scam likely, you know, it's like, anyway, so, and he's like, he said, yeah, I can find someone. And I asked him, then he said like a month later, he came back and said like, oh yeah, I'm still looking for someone. It's like, he hasn't come back yet. So I'm wondering if there is anybody at P&G that's doing this, you know, but I mean, it seems to be at least on their webpage and stuff, like they talk about it. So I mean, it's hard to tell. Maybe it's like the PHB, the butyrates that just disappeared, you know. So maybe they go through it. They have their own circular thought process, you know. Ends up at zero.
It's like net zero by 2040 or 2030.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That's good, you know. I mean, who knows? Anyway, so it seems like the companies I run into, it's like a major thing, you know, like that's the only thing the research divisions are doing right now. I know that like at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's like everyone there is like doing circular economy. And so they're kind of a bridge between government research and industry. At least that's how they think of themselves now. They're originally a standards lab, and they've kind of turned that into like government industry partnership, something, you know, with a nuclear reactor they have. So it's kind of like, anyway, so they have high-tech research tools, but they're trying to make it look like it's worth something to industry. All they do is circular economy. That's everyone's doing that. Like they have a whole group, maybe like 50 people doing this stuff, you know, so it seems like everyone's jumping onto this. So it isn't, so both the research and the marketing and there's also this kind of fluff end, and they're kind of not necessarily talking to each other much, you know. It's kind of like because they're opposite people, like this Cincinnati Recycle and Reuse. And then if you look at like Lyondell, they probably don't have many phone calls together, you know. So it's kind of a funny situation. Like, anyone else have co-ops experiences or anything on this stuff? Yes, good.
R&D, and there's a lot of like pigments, there's a lot of trying to find like natural solutions or like reuse or what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, the additives are a huge problem, you know, it's like one of the biggest problems, and separation of the additives from the polymer is like a big thing. Anyway, seems like people are kind of working around that though right now, but anyway, yeah, I'm trying to get Russ Schwartz to come out, but so far he hasn't responded to emails. I know him really well, you know, but so hopefully he'll come. He's busy too, though. I think he goes to New Jersey a lot, like
Yeah,
goes,
sort of.
yeah, like Lisa Clapp, you know, she might do
Yeah.
it, but I'm not sure. Russ knows a lot. Russ is a really smart guy, so he's really nice to. Lisa's good, but she's more down to earth, you know. But so Russ to talk to him, like you get a lot from him. So I think if he came in, even if he wasn't talking about recycling, it would be good. But I've gotten a lot, we've done a couple of projects. And like, it's always like present something to him, and then his ideas are like so much better, you know? So he's a good guy to have. Anyway, so. Yeah, so this thing's driven partly, so I'm gonna have a section just on regulations, like kind of what, and then, so it's like EU, China, and then California, like the three big kind of regulation places of drive and everything. So people want to sell stuff in EU, China, and California, then you have to have kind of a system where everything's the same, then you have to follow the strictest rules that you have. Right, so anyway, oh yeah, this is part of the EU for cars, like part of the list of the regulations for it. We already went through this. Yeah, and so Unilever's one of the EU, so it's a UK company. It was EU when they came up with this kind of formulation. But they've committed to collect more plastic packaging than they sell. That they're going to collect it and reprocess it and reuse it. So it was pretty good. But so they list this on their webpage, but basically all this stuff is in the EU requirements. It's like they're advertising in the webpage the stuff that they legally have to do in Europe. Of course, a global company, but basically they aren't that nice, you know. Then reduce virgin plastic to half or a third of it, and third reduction in the mass. So they reduce the amount you use. It's like this reduce, reuse, remake kind of theme of things. So they're trying to implement that like almost instantly. So anyway, so it's kind of anyway, it's good that they're doing that. And I don't think P&G has made commitments like that yet, but so these are pretty strict, they're good commitments they're making, but basically they're forced to by the EU. There's a plastic bag menace. Then anyway, this is from the book, you know, so basically this thing about, this is from 1920s, and it's basically saying the same thing. Like this guy Calkins was giving business advice in the 1920s, and it's like there's two classes. It's like things that are used and things that are used up. And then the point of the business model in the 1920s was to change the things that are used into things that are used up to boost the sales of stuff. You know, so you throw away more things. So basically there was a whole basically business model that was the way things should go, right? Even from the 20s to all the way through. And he goes through that in the book. This is like RFK. There's a lot of quotes from RFK around, but this one's about circular economy. It's written in the book someplace, but so yeah, like you can't get rid of plastics because say like wires, like we went to the wire and cable, so you can make a wire, but it's useless without the polyethylene or PVC coating on it, right? Like you can't make any electronic device without plastic. So that means basically you can't get rid of this stuff, and you can't make a paper coating for wires. I mean, it isn't gonna work. It'll have problems. Anyway, so cars, everything has to have plastics in it. So basically we have to figure out how to deal with that. So this, like all these things have some kind of odd thing. Like here's a guy, he swims across the Pacific garbage patch. So in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's the water circulation leads to kind of a cesspool thing. And in the middle of it, there's a pile of garbage. Right. So I think it's not as dramatic as they make it sound. This guy swam across it though. But like in swimming across it, like look what he's wearing. So he's got a rubber wetsuit and a rubber hat, and then rubber goggles with probably plastic lenses in it. So everything he's wearing is non-recyclable plastic. Okay. And I found this in Rhode Island. I go there in the summer, but so it's like they put this for their recycle center, you know, but it's made out of PVC. It's got ferrite iron in it as an additive, right? So the thing that they're putting in the ad for recycling is totally not recyclable. There's no way you could recycle that material. And if you look online, they say like, oh, you can reuse these like refrigerator magnets, just like put your family's picture on it and glue it to it. And then, you know, so it's kind of, this is kind of like the Cincinnati reuse recycle concept. Like you're gonna, somehow everybody's gonna take all their refrigerator magnets, not toss them in the garbage when you're sick of them. Right, so anyway, so everything, even the people that are pushing recycling, they're using stuff that's not recyclable, you know? And so I'm not sure what the answer is exactly, but it's a lot more complicated problem than just like saying, oh, we're gonna go to circular. You know, like you can't replace a refrigerator magnet necessarily with something that is recyclable. I mean, this is pretty convenient to throw on. I mean, they have those to throw on your car and stuff too, if you're an Uber driver or something, or whatever it is. Anyway, so one thing that's in this model is this bottle bill thing. So I forget where I got this from, but basically it's like 10 states that have bottle bill. Ohio isn't one of them. But basically, I mean, you can drastically improve the recycling of like bottles, plastic bottles by doing that. So you go like the 10 deposit states, 71% recovery, then non-deposit is 30% through like street side recovery type things. And then these people figured out, this is like the bottle, there's a bottlebill.org. So they have a vested interest in the bottle bill thing. They figured out the net cost, like for the people that have the deposit states, the cost is less than the people that don't, because we have to pay for the recovery of the bottles, picking them up at the street, whatever. So anyway, the net cost is higher to not have a bottle bill. You know, so this kind of thing, there's probably arguments both ways. Anyway, it's interesting, they note on their webpage that Cincinnati did a study on this in this bottle bill thing. And they found out that they could save a ton of money, basically, by going to having a bottle bill in Cincinnati. So it's kind of a, I don't know, I've lived in states with bottle bills. It's kind of not that big of a deal. You get used to carrying the things back to the grocery store. I mean, it's kind of like becomes a routine. So you don't throw out, even for a nickel a bottle, you just kind of, I don't know. And then there's like a recovery. It's all set up. Like you would do that right now too, maybe. But basically, it becomes a lot easier because there's a system set up, because the nickel pays for the system to exist too. So that basically it just works, you know. So it's kind of easier. I mean, some people don't do it. It doesn't really matter that much because you go from like 27 to 71. So you cut it like less than half of the garbage. Yeah.
Why do states not want to do it?
It's this idea of like it's some kind of constraint on you, I think. Or it's like the government reaching too far. I think that's the main reasoning. And you have to have, also you have to have people that are pushing for it. So Cincinnati, there are people that push for it because they had a study, right? So, yeah.
Talk about this in the circular economy, and the reason why they don't want recycling bins is because the company makes it recycle.
The company, what, the bottle company, or
Yeah, the bottle.
because they have to pay for the, like, taking the bottles back?
The
Is that-
taxpayer.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I guess it depends where you stand, because this bottlebill.org says that it's gonna be like such as cost savings. So I mean, it depends on how you look at it. It's like numbers you can mess around with probably. Overall, I mean, it definitely,
It's about where the financial burden is placed. In the book, the financial burden is placed on the taxpayer, and the company sells more bottles if they don't have to think about.
oh yeah, the companies that, yeah, if they're doing a linear thing, they're gonna sell a lot more bottles, it's true. No, actually though, for the PET, they're just gonna feed it back in to make pellets, so they sell the same bottles. I don't know, anyway, you could debate this for hours probably, and it has been debated even in Cincinnati, right? So I mean, it's just that it exists, that's the point, I guess. It's one option to. It's a regulation option, like, all right, so how are you gonna solve the plastic pollution problem? That's the question. So this is one option to solve it. If you have another option, but the other options aren't really working that well, right? I mean, what's the other options? Yeah, company and the people and the society and
Well, the people in the society have to pressure the company responds to consumer demands. But the company wants to spread advertising to consumers. consume it waste, so the company.
Right, right, so that, but the advertising is kind of like a brainwashing in a sense, right? So it's kind of like the companies have a motivation, they want to keep things as they are, business as usual. They have a motivation to convince people that this is going to be a pain in the neck, not a bottle bill. But people that live in Massachusetts don't think twice about it. It's not that they have nobody complains about, I mean, they might gripe about it or something, but anyway, you don't have to do it. Like you can just toss it and pay the nickel. Right, I think it's like a nickel there, right? No, not necessarily. Romney was from Massachusetts. So it's a nickel a bottle. It's like nothing. So basically, so you get the nickel back. So if you have I mean, it's like 30 cents or something. If you have like 10, whatever, 5. So, but people still do it because it sets it up so there's a place to do it. Right now, you can't do that. I mean, Kroger collects the plastic bags. So that exists with no deposit on it, but no one's collecting the PET bottles. But you'll see that at Rumpke can handle it because PET has an IR signature. So they can have a conveyor belt with PET and like a robot that figures out where the PET bottle is, sends an air and pops the bottle off, blows the air and the bottle flips over a little barrier. So they're already like, there's already technology that can separate from the mixed stream of PET bottles. Like with a robot, basically. It's continuously doing that. So it's, but then again, like they say, like even with that technology, only 27% is being recovered, right? Versus 71 where you put a nickel on it. So you can imagine like a nickel isn't much money. Like it's pretty strange that can drive a big difference. And it's pretty debatable. Basically, there's different options. Different parts of the country do different things, but there's definitely a problem though. So I mean, something. Anyway, I rewrote this, but it hasn't somehow updated on the webpage. So chapter 10, the stuff about what's chapter 10 about? Oh, chapter 10 is the final chapter in the book, and he talks about how it's going to be in the future. It's kind of interesting to read. But I had some notes on that here. That so he's saying like basically the thing about you refill your shampoo bottle, your clothes are made out of algae or something or other, polymers from algae, and then you drive an electric car, you have solar panels to charge it. He's talking about in 10 years, I think that's the way things are going to be in the book. So it's kind of chapter 10 is like the summary of circular versus single use, like where the future is going to be. So the Cincinnati is always 50 years behind. So what Mark Twain said, when the world ends, he wants to be in Cincinnati. Because he'll be 50 years behind. But anyway, so who knows? We will see what happens. So anyway, I wanted to go to this other part, the plastics thing. So where's that thing? Plastics. This one did update, but it wasn't. So this is from Greenpeace. I think it's a plastic whale full of garbage. Yeah, it's an interesting picture. Anyway, so I got stuff from different places here, but maybe I'll skip down to this. This is from the book. This is stuff from the book Plastics in a Circular Economy. He's got a chapter. The book is if it go here. It's so chapter 1 is his version of the fluff book. And chapter 2 chapter 2 is a pretty good like summary of plastics. Anyway, if you could use that, so it's got a lot more than what I want to go through. So you could kind of go through this if you want, you know. See, this is chapter 1. Chapter 2, so it's basically like goes through basically polymer, like intro to polymers more or less, but with a little bit lower key, but it goes through some things you don't really need to know. So I try to take some things that might be useful on that, you know. So it's got this chart. So this is all the kind of major plastic components. And those are the numbers for the recycle. It's like 6 is polystyrene, not recyclable. So high density, low density are recyclable. Polypropylene is marginally recyclable. And then PET is the number 1, like that's because it's the most recycled plastic, right? The water bottles, because you can depolymerize it or you can depelletize it if you want. So basically that's kind of the list of the major things being recycled. Let's see. So let's see. All right, so actually I want to go back here. There's a lot to this that I didn't, these show like some charts showing like the sources of the plastics. What slide this is, I don't remember these things. This is number 14 of 99, but it's not all of them have stuff in it. The whale. This is a pretty good place. It's just showing like the plastics production metric tons, like what this is showing the markets where, like, where is the stuff going to, or like where is it being used? So packaging is like a big thing, and also so that not only is it a big cut of it, so the packaging is going to be like half of the plastics, but it's also like its lifetime is like less than a year. Right, the packaging is going to be like a 2-month lifetime of this thing. So that means that and even though it's like this much of plastics being produced, it's being cycled through. So it ends up, and it goes directly to the waste stream. So packaging is the main problem, it's like one of the main problems, right? And the other sectors are like cars, transportation, construction, but you'll see like construction isn't that bad because it's like a 50-year, 100-year lifetime. So if you make that much plastic, but it's going to be, it's almost like permanently entombed in the place you're living in. Right, so it's out of the system. Whereas packaging is just cycling through and you're just dumping it out. Then electronics have an in-between life cycle between housing and packaging, and transportation has a longer term than electronics, but similar, right? So you have to kind of think about the lifetimes of the. So it's a complicated thing. Like it isn't just. This is according to like the categories of plastics, right? So low density polyethylene. I don't know what LD is though. LDPE, but LD, I don't know. High density polypropylene, polystyrene, and then PVCs. So these are the polyolefins of PVC, PP, HDPE, and LDPE. Oh, maybe that's linear low, like LLDPE or something. So anyway, so if you look at that, it ends up being 80%. Like PVC's here, so you'd add that into the other guys. And this is a total, this is a total world production, I guess, for this thing. Right, so it's exponentially increasing. It's kind of curvy shaped thing, means it's exponentially going up. And then this is where the wastage generates. So you see like the amount used for packaging is smaller than the waste generated because the life cycle is much faster for the thing. Someplace in here I have all the life cycles of these things. I guess maybe I already showed that too. This one is this is the same thing, right? Cutting into the types. So anyway, the polyolefins are going to come from like the petrochemical. So basically you have oil, you distill it, and it's going to go to these cuts, like the lighter things at the top, and then the bunker fuel at the bottom, right? The high sulfur stuff they put into ships and burn it when they're offshore, right? And then you can, so the kerosene stream kind of goes to catalytic to a cracker, and the kerosene stream ends up being the polyolefins. So the cuts, so basically, if you're making gasoline, then you're gonna get a lot of this stuff. And if you don't need that much of the kerosene, you're gonna have to you have to dispose of it somehow. Making polyethylene and polypropylene is a good way to do it. And there's also other ways, you can get the precursors to polyethylene and polypropylene from natural gas too. I think this is LPG. So you have olefin feed, and then you're gonna end up with somewhere here, there's a cracker that, so the cracker is going to take a chain with linear bonds and make it into double bonds. So you make a kind of higher energy bond by cooking it. So you remove a hydrogen, and you pop a bond onto it. So that's also going to produce they talk about hydrogen powered cars, right? But almost all the hydrogen is produced by this process. So it's coming from oil to begin with, and you crack it to make the olefins. So there's not much hydrogen being produced with solar power and a hydrolytic converter or a hydrolysis converter, right? I mean, in the future, yeah. And in the future, you can also take the hydrogen and kind of combine it, you can make polymers from hydrogen too, right? So there's processes that go both ways, but right now it's only going the one way because we're using so much oil. So it's there's so much natural gas, it's really cheap. Right? So again, it's the economy is driving this thing. We end up with the monomers here someplace, which I don't even see in this picture. Someplace ethylene and propylene come out of that thing. This is kind of a picture of a particular plant. I don't know where this is. I think it's in Iran or something or other, but basically they printed the plans for it, how kind of where so the olefins going to be, olefins going to be ethylene, propylene, and they're going to make polypropylene, polyethylene. There's all these other byproducts that come out. Ethylene glycol, so it's polyethylene, 2 carbons with 2 oxygens on the end. So anytime you have matched partners on the ends, you can do a condensation reaction with it. So you take ethylene glycol, so carbon-carbon and 2 OHs at the end, and then you match it with terephthalic acid, which is an aromatic, 2 aromatic rings, and it's got a carboxylic acid on the end. So double bond O and an OH. And then the double bond O combines with the OH from the ethylene glycol, and you get water. So the condensation, condense water off, and that makes PET. It's just a combination. So all these are byproducts of the refining process and the cracking process. Right. So if you're making, if you're making all this gasoline, all these other things come, you have to get rid of the rest of the oil. Right. So you have to get rid of this someplace, and you get rid of it by making olefins, polyolefins from it. Right. So it's kind of and the system is pretty complicated. I mean, it goes from oil wells and oil companies, and there's refinery companies that could be tied to it or might be separate. There's the pipeline companies with all these lines of different pipelines. Somewhere here I have a picture. These are the pipelines in the US, the major ones, and there's minor ones also. Right. So you can see mostly it's gone from Texas to Chicago. This big pipelines going Texas to Chicago, and Chicago's got big production, big polyolefins going on. Then also some of the pipelines go up to New Jersey. So there's stuff going on there too. So a lot of the petrochemical industries in Texas, and then in New Jersey and Illinois. Right? So it's kind of a weird system. With this huge infrastructure makes us hugely advantages over other countries. And if you go to the developing world, there's nothing like this. They dream of having this, this kind of system. That's just the pipelines for hydrocarbon gases, for petrochemical industry. So just part of this plot of all the pipes going everywhere. And so anyway, you can think of it the pipeline going through Minnesota with the crude oil in it, or you can think geez, we have this huge infrastructure that's so powerful, better than anything on the world. That's why we have the best petrochemical industry in the world, chemicals. And so basically there's good and bad to it. But anyway, so all these petrochemical companies Lyondell. So I asked them how's the business? And they're oh, we're selling a polypropylene resin unit in Italy. So they're Bazell. So So that it's all like mergers, right? So basically it's a commodity item. So the prices go up and they decide they're going to build a lot of plants, then it's cyclic and then it drops and then they're stuck with all this excess production capacity. So they fire everybody. Basically people are expendable. Then the thing picks up again. So there's a cycle of about 7 years or so where they go through this thing of like boom, ah. So everyone's really happy right now. This is kind of in the part, but the boom part's coming very soon, you know. So and basically it's because they make all these plants like when things are looking good and they have no foresight, even like 5 years down the road, even though they have a history of like 80 years of doing this, right? So they still don't look 5 years down the road and say like, we aren't going to need this capacity in a couple of years, you know, or these people like hiring all the people. So anyway, so they lopped off this polypropylene resin plant. So they have Bazell was BASF and Shell, right? And Lyondell was strictly like a Texas oil company, like the nastiest kind, worse than Phillips, you know, definitely like down to earth nasty. And then not interested in research or anything like that, just pump the oil, put it into pipes, that's it, you know. So anyway, BASF was originally like in World War II, Germany had only one chemical company, BASF, you know, and they broke it up into pieces. Degussa, which became Evonik, and there's a bunch of other pieces that broke off from it. So it's like in Frankfurt, Germany, on the Main River. The river would change color by the kind of dye they were making. You know? So basically, the whole river, if you go from Frankfurt to Mainz, Germany, which is about 30 miles or something, is just all chemical plants. I mean, it makes New Jersey look like a joke. Like there's a huge like chemical facility there. Anyway, so basically BASF made polyolefins there. And then Shell also made polyolefins, like I think in the Netherlands. So they joined together to make Bazell. So they're like buying and trading. This Wall Street guys are just buying and trading these divisions, these companies. This is a commodity producer. And then finally Lyondell bought, or Bazell bought, someone bought someone, and they ended up being Lyondell Bazell. So I know a guy that spent his whole career there. He's retired now. Basically, he had I think he had 20 business cards. He always worked at the same place, but it had been bought and sold so many times. He had like 20 business cards on his wall, like for the different companies that had owned that, basically what's Lyondell Bazell now. So anyway, they have in Italy, they have a big research place, which is where Nada, the chemist that invented polypropylene and won the Nobel Prize for it, was. He was at that plant. And then Ziegler, the other guy, was in Germany, I think probably in Frankfurt. So anyway, the company now owns both of those like Nobel laureate sites, I think. And so they also have a bunch of production capacity in Italy. And then this is one of them, and they sold it off. But at the same time, when they sold that off, they kind of traded it for this Suez recycled plastic company, which is in the Netherlands. So basically, all these oil companies are buying these kind of what were startup recycled plastic companies, because they need to have in their product line, they need to have like cuts, like the different cuts of recycled components in the polyethylene, because the consumers are demanding to have like certain fractions of it, right? Like you've got to buy a 50% recycle, and if they aren't selling it, they'll get it from Dow or from Exxon or somebody, right? So basically, every one of the petrochemicals companies is buying up these kind of smaller scale recycling companies. So I guess if you started up with a recycling company, you'd be in pretty good shape now if you get a big buyout, you know, so they can sell their products still. So that's kind of the situation for this thing. It's a commodity industry. And again, like the most of it is the polyolefins, like that's going to be the 80% of it. And then 20% is going to be, I think 20% is PET. So this is like a kind of a smaller chunk of it. So there isn't really a big component after the polyolefins. So if you're talking about solving the problem, so solving the polyolefin problem is the main part, then you just have 20% left. And the PET is a big chunk of that, so. And some of the things like polyurethane. I mean, you're not gonna probably recycle some of these things, like some of them are just gonna end up, there isn't a solution to it. It's a cross-linked, usually it's cross-linked rubber. So the best thing that probably to do with it is to burn it, and better scenario would be like to pyrolyze it and make oil with it, like kind of heat it up below oxygen, and you can make like a sludgy oil kind of thing with it. You can feed into either, you could distill it, you could just feed it back into the same cycle, or you could just burn it as it is for fuel, for heating fuel, or for ships, things like that. Anyway, so there's that business. So then this is kind of from the book. So he's good, like it's pretty good what he does. So he breaks down the polymer thing into like different ways you could talk about plastics, right? So you could say like bioplastics, and then semi-synthetic is that you can get ethylene. So when you have a banana and you put it in a bag, it makes ethylene gas. That's what makes it ripen. So ethylene's around. So you could use bananas to make polyethylene theoretically. Okay, I mean, so people are seriously looking at that, like they're kind of figuring out different ways to make ethylene naturally. So that would be like a kind of a semi-synthetic plastic. And anyway, if you do make ethylene from bananas and then pipe it, it would go into the same pipe. It would go into that pipe from Texas, and they'd use it in Chicago, and they would just say it's 25% banana polyethylene. You know what I mean? So it isn't going to be like pure, it'll still have a petrochemical component to it, feed into the same kind of nasty big factory. Clinton, Iowa or something is where they make it. So it's like right outside Chicago kind of. Anyway, so and there's synthetic, which is basically all petrochemical. So that's one way to kind of look at it, Then chemistry wise, he says organic, inorganic. Some of the stuff he says is kind of weird because the inorganic polymers are basically PDMS, like siloxane polymers. And then organic is like everything else. So siloxane polymers is probably like 1% of plastics, like silicone rubber, bathtub sealant. Right, it's got a really broad, like Hollywood masks when they want to make you look like a monster, are all made of PDMS. So it's like these weird niche markets for it that are lucrative. It's like Dow Corning and GE had the silicone market. GE sold it off, and Dow Corning still exists, even though they survived the breast implant lawsuit stuff in the 90s. So they kind of grew out of a death cycle, more or less, but they're still like a really vibrant company because all these sectors, but the PDMS comes from sand originally. And then you have to cook the sand. So some of you might have co-opted the plant. There's a plant, Dow Corning plant on the Ohio River, like in Kentucky, I think. Carrollton. Have you worked there?
I will.
Oh, you will? All right. So anyway, so it's a pretty nasty process. Like you take sand somehow, you purify it, and you have to put it with chlorine. It ends up being SiCl something, like Cl4.
Yeah, like dichlorodiethylene, silane.
Yeah, it's the kind of place that can blow up easily. But the stuff you make is like really useful. Like it's incredibly useful stuff.
No,
or medical. Like the PDMS is like so useful. Like you couldn't have most of the medical shunts and stuff, like all the medical stuff is tied to the PDMS. So it is important material, because the clear rubber, like it's really tough. So it's like no one else can make that. And it's also additives for like waterproofing things and stuff like that. So anyway, it's a great business to be in, I think. But it is like the original starting point, like this place where you're going to is really dangerous, I think, parts of it. So anyway, so yeah, we're kind of out of time. So why don't I put it there? We can kind of stop there and we can go on here. Thank
Thankfully, that's flat. I don't think on the bar.